Hey everyone, welcome to this video tutorial. We are walking through paper 3 from 2019 with some examiner commentary. Both of these are available on the AQA website and I have popped them in the comments below. Making sure that you are familiar with the front page, you will be asked to pop your name and your signature there, your candidate number and your centre number. If you're unsure about those, please ask your invigilator or the exams officer in your school or college. It will give you all the details on this front page, and you do not need any other materials apart from this question booklet, because it is like paper 1 that you answer the questions in this booklet. If you do need any additional paper, you will need to pop your hand up and ask the invigilator and they'll give you one of the additional answer booklets as well. As always with the exam papers for Sociology AQA, you will need to write in black ink or black ballpoint pen and make sure that you are answering all the questions. So like paper 1 and paper 2, you will be answering 6 questions. Now on this paper there are only 6 questions available, so you answer all of them. You must answer them in the space provided. Don't write in the margin around each page, and do all your rough work. They mentioned on a previous examiner report that it is more pleasing to see more students are doing detailed plans to write the answer for the higher mark questions. So if you do a plan, make sure that you leave it there, and if you don't want it marked, cross it out. The marks for each question are shown in brackets and the maximum mark is 80. That is a really good indicator about how long you should be spending on each of those questions. And any questions that are essay based, so 10 marks or more, should be in and using exam style structure, for example. Make sure that you use good English, organise your information clearly, so make sure that you are planning your answers, and of course specialist vocabulary is just referring to using sociology keywords, concepts, names, ideas, theories, which show you that you've got good sociological knowledge. So question 1 and 2 are very similar style questions worth 4 and 6 marks, and they will ask you to outline. Now what that means is that you need to identify a point of what has been asked and then briefly explain it, so you can get the full marks with 2 sentences for each point really. So don't write too much on these questions. So looking at question 1, this is asking you for reasons, and that is your trigger word, and that will give you your identification mark, and then you need to explain it to get the second mark. Now this question was generally answered quite well. Most students were able to identify 2 reasons. They tended to be things like blocked opportunities, status frustration, or the inability to achieve society's mainstream goals. Some students did also talk about labelling or being marginalised, or the criminal environment as their reasons. Some considered the role of gang subcultures in offering boys a male role model that their lone parents' families may have failed to provide. However, a number of answers gave minimal explanations, or they explained the same reason twice, usually variants of blocked opportunities. So what I would advise you to do is make sure that your 2 reasons are distinctly different and your explanations are different also. You might link it to an example of a deviant subculture, so then you can make the distinction between the explanations for both points. So question 2 is very similar. In this case it's asking for 3 rather than 2, and you've got to do the same: outline, identify and briefly explain. So we're looking for reasons why victims may not report crimes, and again this question was generally answered quite well. Most students were able to get at least 4 out of the 6, and a lot of students did get the full 6 marks. The most frequent reasons outlined were lack of confidence or trust in the police, fear of retribution from the offender, the crime being too trivial, shame or embarrassment about being a victim, being unaware that they're a victim, being unwilling to go through the ordeal of giving evidence or reliving the experiences. Some students did link it to examples such as domestic abuse, sexual assault and rape, used to illustrate some of the reasons offered. And again, the reason why students did not gain full marks was either due to repetition of the same reason or failure to explain the suggested reason clearly. It is worth noting on this question that some students wrote unnecessarily long answers which they could not be credited for. Remember, you can gain the marks for stating what the reason is and explaining it, and that can be done in as fewer sentences as 2. So here's question 3. This is a 10 marker that students should spend about 15 minutes in answering. And the main focus of this question is on the skill of application. The students need to refer to the item to develop their knowledge from it and then answer whatever the question's asking. So this question was asking from apply material from item A. It tells you it 3 times to use the item, and just encourage or remind students to do that. Analyse 2 reasons why crime reduction strategies may not always be successful, and what you're looking for in the item is a hint to a possible crime reduction strategy which students then should write about. The problem with this question, which was the reason why it wasn't very well answered, was that some students failed to use the item to develop their answers from. Some students just described some crime prevention strategies, but didn't identify why they're not always successful. Some drifted into talking about why they were successful, which meant that they didn't gain any marks there. Now, your best answers applied the item and they linked the assumptions from it about why or how offenders commit the crimes, and what crimes it is important to reduce, and the role of the criminal justice system and the agencies there. And then they went on to explicitly explain the reasons why those strategies didn't work, and that gives you a little bit of idea about how you might structure that answer. In terms of the crime reduction strategies that you could have talked about, you could have talked about target hardening and zero tolerance approaches. And reasons for the failure of these strategies could include failure to understand the offender's motivations are not always rational. So they might have mentioned about Clark's rational choice theory there. And that a strategy focusing on street crime often neglects the most harmful crimes, such as corporate or state crimes. Your next question is question 4. This is your 30 marker, and students should be spending at least 45 minutes on this answer. It is also recommended that for these longer answers that students should be planning their answers, organising their thoughts, getting it onto paper before they start to answer it. I would recommend that you use this space here to do your plan and actually start your answer at the top of the next page, and I've seen that done quite a few times, and that's not a problem. And it's really logical, and it just shows that students are thinking about the questions that they're answering. So this question produced a range of responses. It was asking for the sociological explanations levels of female offending. Some students did drift to talk about male offenders and male criminalities, and some drifted to talk about victims or female victims of crime rather than focusing on what the question was actually asking. Most students were able to use the item as a starting point and develop their answers from there, which is a really positive thing for them to do. And your good answers were able to discuss some or all of the following using the correct concepts and evidence, such as sex role theory, gender socialisation, hide and sewn and control theory or patriarchal control, Adler's liberation thesis and the weakening of patriarchy. A little bit of analysis, you could compare Carlin's research and the class and the gender deals, and also the chivalry thesis. Your better answers evaluated as they went along throughout their answers. Questioning, for example, the extent to which changing gender roles may have made the theory less relevant in today's society, for example, in terms of patriarchal control, and then linking this evaluation to the liberation thesis. Some better answers questioned the continuing relevance of the chivalry thesis in the context of gender equality and the increased number of women working in the criminal justice system. But overall, a broad range of answers to this type of question. The final part of this paper is on theory and methods, where there are 2 questions, a 10 mark and a 20 mark. Your first one that you come across is your question 5, which is your 10 marker. You should spend in about 15 minutes on this. And like all the 10 markers, you do not need an intro or conclusion, and it is asking you for 2 clear paragraphs outlining to whatever's been asked. So this question was asking for 2 reasons why sociologist research may not always be objective. The word objective tripped a few students up here, that they confused it with reliability or being representative or validity. But your better responses did understand what that meant. and they were able to give an explanation on it, such as the researchers' preferred perspective, their personal values, political commitment or career interests, or the influence of funding bodies. And these answers then often address the impact of this factor on the method, the research findings and their interpretation, so as an impact on it. Some students reference Becker, Goldner, Weber and interpretivist often appeared in those answers. Your weaker students did mention about objectivity, but it was more about from the angle of the subject who was being researched, that they might have had differing views and differing interpretations, whereas the question was asking about the sociologist's viewpoint. Your final question, question 6, is 20 marks. In this case, it was a theory question asking you to evaluate the contribution of Marxist approaches to understand today's society. 20 marks. You should be spending about 30 minutes to answer this. There was, in general, answers here were of a reasonable standard, but there was a wide variation. The good answers had a solid and extensive knowledge of general Marxist concepts and then were able to examine this contribution to our understanding of today's society by looking at specifically the Marxist approaches to a particular topic area. The popular ones were class differences in education, and also within crime. Your weaker answers looked at it from a topic approach, and then it drifted away from the theory based to actually it became an education answer or a crime answer, for example. So again, your better answers were able to take your Marxist concepts and then apply them to different topic areas to show the impact of them. The evaluation tended to take two paths. So you either took the other perspective or the other theory criticising Marxism. Often it was functionalist, feminist or postmodern criticism. Or you could take the view that Marxism is outdated because there was more social mobility or equality or a more complex class structure that Marx wrote, or he predicted a revolution and it never happened. But a lot of answers took the first path, who then started to write about the other theories, often did get sidetracked into writing more about functionalist and feminist and postmodernist and didn't draw it back to what they were actually evaluating, which was the Marxist approaches. Okay. Other answers did show analysis and evaluation by considering the merits of the different Marxist approaches, such as Althusser, your structural Marxist, and Gramsci, who is your humanist or your neo-Marxist approaches as well. But overall, a well-answered paper, and hopefully this has given you some ideas and what you need to watch out for when answering questions on this final crime and theory and methods paper. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments below, and I'll answer them when I get them. Okay, thanks, bye.